Hey everyone, and welcome. Today, we're going to break down the fundamentals of a really powerful way of building software, object-oriented programming.
So, if you've ever worked with databases, you know the drill, right? You store data in tables, all neat and tidy, in rows and columns. But here's the thing, the real world isn't static like that. It's full of things that have their own identity and can, actually do stuff. A car isn't just a row of data, it's a dynamic thing that can accelerate, break, and change its own state. So, how on earth do we write code that actually reflects that reality?
Well, the answer is to kind of shift our perspective. We need to move beyond thinking about just raw data and start thinking about objects. These are self-contained little bundles that are way more than just a list of properties.
And here's the big idea. An object isn't just the what, the data. It's also the how, the actions it can perform. It wraps those two things up together into one single, neat package that can exist all on its own in our program.
Every single object is built on these three pillars. Let's stick with our car example. Its identity is like its VIN number. It's totally unique, there's only one of it. Its state is all about its current condition. The color is red, the speed is 60 miles per hour, the tank is half full. And its behavior, well, that's what it can do. Accelerate, brake, turn, all of it. You need all three to have a complete object.
Okay, so this idea of individual objects makes sense. We have your car, my car, a whole parking lot full of them. But it would be crazy inefficient to build every single one from scratch. There's got to be a better way, right? A kind of factory for making them?
And that's exactly what a class is. It's the master blueprint. If you're coming from the database world, think of a class like a create table statement. It defines the whole structure, what columns exist, what data types they have, but it's not the actual data itself. It's just the template that all the future rows, or in our case, all the future objects, are going to follow.
So the process is pretty straightforward. First, you define your automobile class. This blueprint says, hey, every car is going to have a color and a speed, and it will be able to accelerate. Then you instantiate an object from that blueprint. You create My Red Tesla, which gets its own unique identity and its own state. Its color is red, its speed is currently 0, but it uses all the behaviors that were defined back in the main blueprint.
Now, this is where it gets really interesting. We can take this blueprint idea and build on it. Not all blueprints have to be the same. Some can be super general, while others can be incredibly specific. This lets us arrange them in hierarchies, and that opens the door to one of the most powerful concepts in all of OOP. And that concept is inheritance. This is a huge deal for code reuse, because it helps us follow a golden rule in software design. Don't repeat yourself. Instead of copying and pasting the same code over and over, we can have more specific classes just inherit everything from the more general ones.
But, and this is a big but, inheritance is definitely a double-edged sword. On the one hand, it's amazing. You can create a sports car class that inherits all the basics from automobile, and then you just add the new stuff like a turbo. Fantastic for avoiding duplicate code. But on the other hand, it creates a really tight connection. If you make a change to that main automobile class, you could accidentally break the sports car class and every other class that relies on it. This is the classic problem that trips so many people up. Logically, you'd think, well, a square is a rectangle, right? So it just makes sense for a square class to inherit from a rectangle class. But hold on, think about how they behave. With a rectangle, you should be able to change its width without changing its height. That's part of its contract, its expected behavior. But you can't do that with a square. If you change a square's width, you have to change its height to keep it a square. This breaks the parent's rules, and that can cause some really weird, hard-to-find bugs. All right, so with all these objects floating around and these sometimes tricky inheritance relationships, how do we keep them from stepping on each other's toes and creating total chaos? The solution is to give each object a little privacy, a way to protect its own internal business from the outside world.
Now, there are two key ideas that make this work, and they often get mixed up. Encapsulation is the mechanism. It's the physical act of bundling the data and the methods together into that object we talked about. Information hiding, on the other hand, is the strategy. It's the design choice to hide the object's internal state, keeping it private, and only exposing a few safe public methods for other objects to use.
And that's the whole payoff. By hiding all the messy internal details and giving the world a simple, stable way to interact with our object, we create these reliable, self-contained building blocks. Think about it. You don't need to know how a car engine actually works to press the gas pedal. You just need to know the public interface. This is what lets us build huge, complicated software out of small, simple, and trustworthy pieces. So we've really come full circle, haven't we? We started by asking how to model a real-world thing like a car. The answer was objects, these bundles of state and behavior. We saw how classes act as blueprints and how ideas like inheritance and encapsulation help us manage everything. But that leaves us with one last big question. If every object is its own little self-contained world, how do we get them to talk to each other and cooperate to build something that's actually useful?
Thanks so much for joining me for this explainer. If you found this helpful, do me a favor and hit that like button, share it with someone else who might be curious, and definitely subscribe for more deep dives. I'll see you in the next one.